I think it's fair to say that for a while now, I, like probably many of you out there, have been really drifting away from the WWE product lately. It's not really must-see TV anymore. The ratings are showing that WWE just isn't as popular and just isn't as interesting as it was, you know, say 10 years ago. And because of that now, because WWE has kind of pushed me away as a fan a little bit, even though I still watch it, I've become way more of a TNA fan lately, and this is for many reasons. You've probably noticed on my videos, I've got a more positive vibe about TNA. I've done more positive TNA videos than I have positive WWE videos. And what I want to do really in this comparison piece is I want to tell you why exactly I've become more of a TNA fan and why I like some of the stuff that TNA do a lot more and why WWE pushed me away. So it's going to be kind of a comparison piece, why WWE pushed me away and why TNA has essentially brought me in. So give me your thoughts in the comment section below. If you're in my position, if you're not in my position, if you agree or disagree with any of the points I come up with, let me know down in the comment section. This video is 10 reasons why I have become more of a TNA fan as of late. I think the first reason is very obvious in my opinion, in the sense that TNA appeals way more to adults. You know, let's face it guys, WWE lately has focused their entire product around pleasing children and, you know, trying to appeal to children and women and demographics in which you wouldn't think that it would make business sense to do, and that is something that I personally cannot get into, and that in that way WWE has presented loads of stuff for the kids and not really much for adults such as myself, so it was really hard for me to get into the product, and that is essentially what has pushed me away as a WWE fan and why I don't find what a lot of WWE does very good, because it's not really appealed to me, and that is the kind of business that WWE wants to do. Well, then they're not appealing to me, whereas TNA, in my opinion, gear way more to adults. They don't really gear to kids, they gear to people such as myself, who are adults, who are more grown up, or are more mature, who understand more things. You know, TNA gives me characters and storylines, and not just that, but a TV show that seems to be way more geared to adults, and it's just something that I can enjoy a lot more, which is why I'm more drawn into what TNA are giving me, because what TNA are giving me is essentially appealing to my demographic, whereas WWE's product really isn't. Reason number 2 may just be one that applies to me, but I just prefer TNA's style of wrestling, and I'll tell you what I mean by this. I've noticed ever since I've been watching TNA and WWE and comparing both that TNA's style of wrestling is a lot faster paced than WWE. It seems to really satisfy the middle ground between ROH and WWE style of wrestling, in my opinion. WWE style of wrestling is more elemented to storytelling and what casual fans would like, whereas ROH is more pandering to smart marks and people that like the style of wrestling, people that like the complicated moves and the high spots and stuff like that. And I think TNA does a very good job in giving us a middle ground between storytelling and also being able to go in the ring, like in-ring quality, for example. And it's just wrestled at a much faster pace than WWE. Wrestlers seem like they can do more in the ring. Whereas WWE wrestling, in my opinion, it's very generic. Matches seem to be done the same way a lot of the time, and they seem to build to the same spots. You see the same kind of spots done, whereas with TNA, there seems to be a lot more variety with some of the spots and stuff like that. And sometimes things like that just make it way more interesting to watch. I'll give you an example of a match which I think on TNA Free TV was just really out there. It made me feel like I was watching a proper wrestling match. Jeff Hardy versus Kurt Angle at Champions Thursday, and the After Bound for Glory. You know, it was like I was watching a main event match. That match made me invest myself into the match. The way they were wrestling it, it felt like they were putting their all on the line. Whereas in WWE, you don't really feel like they're doing that, because obviously their health and safety now is very high after the wellness policy and things like that, and after the Attitude Era. And that's all fine and good if you want to prolong your wrestlers long term, but it doesn't really make matches very interesting, in my opinion. You want another example? Look at most of the BFG series matches. They really sucked you in very well, whereas WWE, let's say they put a tournament on, they don't really get that same feeling from WWE, which is why right now I'm preferring TNA to WWE. Reason number 3, I have more emotional investment in TNA's characters and feuds as opposed to WWE. It just seems to me like the characters in TNA are more aimed at me and I can connect with them a lot more, and that is why I like the characters, not just that, but also the feuds in TNA right now Also, the characters, there are a lot more unique characters in my opinion in TNA, and the characters just seem more real, you know, rather than Cena and Sheamus, who kind of feel like Superman and like nothing can eclipse them. In TNA, you have characters that are vulnerable, that can actually lose a match clean, that I can actually buy into. That's kind of helped by Bruce Pritchard's booking, but I feel like I can emotionally invest myself into the characters and feuds in TNA way more than WWE. I'll give you one example. Bobby Roode versus James Storm. I was massively invested into that feud, way more than I was invested into anything WWE. And really, overall, on the whole, TNA have more people on the roster who I can really like and get behind. They have some good veterans and they have some good young guys. And it just means that I care more about the product because I care more about more characters in TNA than I do WWE, and because there's a better rounded roster in TNA, it means feuds are generally more interesting because there's more people that I'm interested in that they can put in feuds, whereas with WWE there's quite not that many people that I'm really that interested in, so the feuds really that I can be interested in are very limited. You know, I think a product is way more enjoyable when there's a lot of variety and there's a lot of different things going in the show, whether that's characters, whether that's feuds, whether that's style of wrestling, whether that's the size of wrestlers. And I think TNA to me gives me more variety, and that is reason number 4 in this video. It seems like WWE sometimes just really lack variety. It seems like the wrestlers wrestle the matches the same way. It seems like a lot of the characters are very similar. A lot of people just say Sheamus is version 2 of John Cena, and they could have a point there. Whereas you look at AJ Styles and James Storm, they're not very similar. Even though they're 2 top babyfaces, they're not similar in any way. So there's wrestling styles and characters, and it seems that WWE just really doesn't have the variety that TNA has. And that is why I'm more drawn into TNA's product. TNA have focused less so lately. They've focused on women, so a different gender for variety. They focused on the X division, less so lately, but it's still focused on to some degree, which is a different style of wrestling. And they just generally seem to have more variety in what they can offer me, which really, in my opinion, makes the product way more interesting to watch and what draws me in, because I can watch something like that I like, something that I like, something that I like, and it generally will appeal to more people more when there's more variety on the show, because you generally will have something on the show then that everyone will like. Whereas with WWE, I don't really think you have that. It's very top heavy, so if you don't like what you're seeing in the main event scene, i.e. Cena and Sheamus, and they don't really put that much focus in their mid-card for you to really care about the mid-card either. Any wrestling company can have one top guy, and they can have one top draw which is going to draw them a lot of money. As long as they're interesting and everyone and most of the people seem to like that one guy and are generally emotionally invested in them. Examples such as Hulk Hogan. He was the one top guy of the golden era that really helped carry the WWE through a lot of the times, even though they had a lot of other star power. Essentially everything was revolved around Hogan because he was a massive money draw for the WWE. The Attitude Era was essentially revolved around Stone Cold Steve Austin. Some people may say The Rock was the biggest guy in the Attitude Era, but it revolved around Stone Cold Steve Austin. He was generally considered the biggest draw, and the reason why the Attitude Era was the Attitude Era in his feud with Vince. And you look at WWE now, they've put all their focus on John Cena. Now, are you really, as adult fans who essentially John Cena is devoted to kids, essentially, can you really get yourself emotionally invested into that character in WWE when it's focused to kids and you're an adult? You really can't. So the focus on the top guy, really, that one top guy, I can't really get behind. Everything seems to revolve around John Cena in WWE, and this is what put me off WWE. Everything was going to revolve around John Cena, and I really can't get behind the John Cena character because it's very stale and it doesn't appeal to me. Whereas in TNA, they put focus on not one top guy, but they put focus in many different wrestlers. That not only provides us a little bit of variety at the top, but they're generally wrestlers, like I said, characters I can get more into. You've seen people being focused like Austin Aries, Bully Ray, James Storm, Bobby Roode, Jeff Hardy, AJ Styles was a top guy for the company. They don't really have one top guy like WWE, which in my opinion, as much as I think the top guy can be very good for a company, you can't really say that anyone is the face of TNA. So it means that TNA can put a lot of the focus on as many wrestlers as they like, and it just provides something different in the main event scene and something different that you can put your focus on. And that is what I like about TNA. Like I said earlier, spice and variety is very good in TNA, and they don't just put all their eggs in one basket with one top guy, even though a lot of people will argue that Jeff Hardy is that top guy for TNA. But he hasn't really been a top guy for the last year or so you can't really argue that either. So one thing that's really, really making me like TNA right now over WWE is the fact that TNA don't put their focus on one guy, they put their focus around 10 or 12 guys, which can be a good thing. For an adult fan such as myself, I want a little bit of edge to my wrestling product. I want a little bit of something that I can really get behind, as something that can appeal to me, as something that is just different and a bit out there. And in my opinion, WWE hasn't really been able to offer that. Yes, you could say it's because of Linda McMahon's Senate campaign, the PG run essentially, but at the end of the day, there is very little edge to the product in WWE, whether that is the feuds, whether that is the characters, whether that is the wrestling. There just really isn't that much edge to WWE that really makes it stand out from the other crowd. Whereas in TNA, I see loads of things that have edge in the product. They curse a lot more. There's blood. And I don't care what you say sometimes, but the fact that that's kind of stuff gives the product more of an edge, which in my opinion makes it way more interesting. You look at the Aces and Eights angle. That essentially is an unknown group trying to take over the damn company. There's Anarchy in the Impact Zone. You got Austin Aries doing like work shoot promos. You've got Jeff Hardy thinking what he's going to do. These are different things in the product, and it gives the product more of a feel of must-see TV. So more edge in the product generally, for me as an adult fan, is better, whereas WWE has kind of put me off because there really isn't that much edge in their product, which makes it a much less interesting product to watch compared to TNA's, which I feel has been more interesting over the last year. When I watch a WWE show and watch the WWE product, the product really comes across as very scripted, and in my opinion, that comes across very badly. It's not just that, it's the fact that the promos that the wrestlers do feel forced. The characters seem very generic and very limited in my opinion, and generally when a show comes across as very, very scripted, it doesn't feel like people are naturally doing what they're doing. It feels like they're being forced to do it, which means that in my opinion the quality of what they're doing decreases because it's not very natural to them. Now, this is where my point comes in. WWE lately has felt very scripted, and the reason why I've really been put off by WWE is because of that reason, whereas with TNA, it feels much less scripted in my opinion. It feels much more real, much more off the cuff. A live TV show feels like a live TV show. Characters aren't limited by certain lines. Matches aren't limited in that kind of case, and essentially TNA feeling less scripted makes me want to watch it a lot more and makes the product a lot more interesting because it feels more natural and it feels more real, and that is the kind of thing that I as a fan can really get behind a lot more. In my opinion, just the way in general that TNA presents their product stands out as something more than what the WWE is presenting right now. I'll give you an example. TNA live shows feel live. They feel like anything can happen. You've got the open fight night concept. It feels like anything can happen. Whereas with WWE, like I said, it feels very scripted. It feels very planned. I'll give you a very good example of this. When Kane and Daniel Bryan and anger management scene and Kane did that and fire came out from the garbage can, that's not going to happen on live TV. When Vince McMahon was dancing to Brodus Clay's music, how the hell did that happen on live TV? That's not something that can happen live. Whereas with TNA, you've got stuff like James Storm telling the cameraman to go backstage to try and find Kurt Angle because he got attacked by the Aces and Eights. And that generally just feels a lot better because they're presenting their product as something that is live, as something that anything can happen. And when you feel that you can predict what is happening, it really decreases the entertainment value of the show. Whereas in my opinion, TNA feels like anything can happen and you probably won't guess it's going to happen. Not just that, but in my opinion, TNA breaks the mold of WWE's bland generic product with different concepts. They've tried to be different, which is the way they present their product. They presented to us open fight night when anyone can call out anyone. Champions Thursday, where one championship will get defended and they're trying to pick between 4 wrestlers. The gut check segment was bringing through a new wrestler, essentially a very, very rip-off, very, very good rip-off of Tough Enough, essentially. You know, they have more reality elements. In my opinion, reality is a very good thing you can use in wrestling if you use it correctly. And just the way TNA has presented their product as a whole, using all the things I've talked about here, is generally something that I can enjoy a lot more than WWE's product, which feels very scripted and very generic and very bland. Let's face it guys, a lot of people got into WWF or WCW because of the storylines, because of the characters, but there are times when you really just want to see a good wrestling match because, let's face it guys, a lot of people here in the YWC, they really like wrestling. They go to a point where sometimes they overrate in-ring quality, but sometimes we like to just sit and watch a wrestling match and we just want the product to feel like it's embracing pro wrestling. Something that WWE has done a lot lately is shy away from the fact that they are a wrestling company, which kind of goes against their core concepts as to what they did that really started off really the mainstream boom in wrestling. They've gone away from their core, they've gone away from what is essentially their core value and they've started to shy away from it. Now, how can I get behind a company that shies away from something that is what got them so famous in the first place? In my opinion, that is what is putting me off WWE. They don't really seem to embrace wrestling right now. They seem to be more about entertainment, and while that might be better for the casual fans, it doesn't really get me as a hardcore wrestling fan that comes on here on YouTube and talks about the product. Whereas in my opinion, TNA seem like they embrace a lot wrestling even more. They call their program Impact Wrestling. Total non-stop action. It feels like a product that embraces wrestling a lot more. And if you watch the TV program, sometimes they may not have as much wrestling, or they may have equal amount of wrestling to WWE, but their wrestling just feels more important. You know, you have the storylines, you have the characters, you have the promos, but you feel like you're watching a wrestling show with TNA, whereas with WWE, you feel like you're watching sports entertainment. And really, as much as I think sports entertainment has been a good thing for mainstream, as a wrestling fan that got into wrestling because of the elements of wrestling rather than sports entertainment, sometimes it's just nice to have a company or a product in TNA that seems to embrace wrestling sometimes rather than shy away from it, which essentially is what got wrestling to where it is in the first place. And the last reason I'm going to talk about is a very simple one. WWE's flagship show, Raw, has just not been a very entertaining one to me. Like I said, the show just doesn't really feel like it's must-see TV. It doesn't really feel like it has edge. The 3-hour thing is really putting me off, which is really throwing me away from WWE TV and really making me not look forward to watching Raw or SmackDown. Whereas with TNA, I generally do look forward to Impact. There have been times when I haven't, but the majority of the time, I've really felt inside that I've wanted to watch Impact. I've been looking forward to it. I've wanted to watch it to see what's going to happen next, whatever. I think the show in general has been a lot more entertaining over the last year than WWE's flagship show, which is Raw. And that is another reason why I can get into TNA and why I'm more of a fan of TNA. Their flagship program, in my opinion, is just way better than WWE's flagship program in Raw. So you've heard my 10 reasons why I've become more of a TNA fan and why I've been really put off the WWE product, but at the same time also drawn more into the TNA product. Let me know down in the comment section below if there's any reasons why you have become more of a TNA fan, or any reasons why you have been really put off from the WWE product. If you have any more reasons to add, let me know down in the comment section below. I just want to get your thoughts on some of the points that I have mentioned and what you think of the points I've mentioned too. So thank you very much for watching this video. If you have, I have been Mr. Parkin. I am more of a TNA fan right now than I am a WWE fan. Maybe it's because I like to be in the minorities, for example. I don't really know. I like metal, heavy metal, death metal. No one else really seems to like it. Everyone else seems to like mainstream music. Maybe it's just me as a person. I prefer to be a fan of the smaller company rather than the bigger company. That's just my thoughts. Let me know in the comment section below what you think of the points I've made in this video. Thank you very much for watching, and good